We must never forget about tool safety when we're handling tools, especially power tools. And Harbor Freight has released something that I think we should at least talk about, the safety factor on this particular power tool. It's an adaptation for their Hercules circular saw. It's a Hercules beam cutter attachment for the Hercules circular saw. I think this deserves a good talk about. Hello anyone, I'm Scott Bain. They call me the old farmer. The Hercules beam cutting attachment for the Hercules circular saw has caught my attention and I'm concerned about the safety of it. Now, granted, with any power tool, if you keep your concentration in place and follow the safety precautions, you're not going to get injured unless there's a mechanical failure within the tool. But I kind of consider this beam cutter, which is an attachment to a circular saw, as, first of all, something that we don't need, and secondly, something that puts an additional risk of injury within reach. Now, back in the 50s, a radial arm saw was the popular tool that you would find in the typical home. Nowadays, it's a table saw. Both tools can be used safely. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what I'm saying about the beam cutter. What I'm talking about is there more risk using a particular tool than if you use something else. Prime example, the radial arm saw has more blade exposed as it's running, and it can be tilted towards the body. And yes, it's more dangerous than a table saw. That isn't to say a table saw isn't dangerous, especially when you put on some attachments like a dado blade. You're putting more stress on the table saw, and therefore you're adding more risk. But again, keeping a sharp focus on what you're doing, just about any tool is safe, if you assume that the tool's job is not to do the job you want it to do, but to come back and bite you. If you keep that in mind, you might be a little bit safer. So when I look at this beam cutter, why do you need it on a circular saw? It's now using the circular saw in a way it wasn't really designed. And you're having a blade that's spinning. Granted, it's got a blade guard on it, but a lot of that blade is out of sight. And you're putting a pressure on the circular saw in a way that it wasn't really designed. So for me, since a beam cutter isn't cutting an accurate cut, I would only consider it for something to use as a rough cut, and then you fine-tune your cut after you cut the piece down. That maybe we should look at all the numerous chainsaws that Harbor Freight offers. Now, I've got 3 different ones that I've talked about in the past. All electric. I got rid of my 2 cycles. I've got 2 chainsaws that are corded, and I got a Bauer chainsaw. And they do everything that I want them to do. And it may be worthwhile to look at those, or maybe an Atlas that's offered at Harbor Freight as the beam cutter. One of the ways that you can make sure you have an accurate cut is to use clamps and clamp a guide to the beam itself that you're cutting. This way, the blade is kind of guided through the cut. And of course, you'd have to set up using clamps with extra pieces of wood in a way that the chainsaw doesn't make contact with the clamps. That would be a terrible mess if it did. But you could use a couple of blocks of wood to hold that blade accurate while you do the cut. And you're seeing what you're doing. It's more visible for the operator to see what's going on with a chainsaw over this beam cutter that's offered by Harbor Freight. Could you use this beam cutter safely? Of course you can. But if for some reason you get distracted, it's easier to be injured by it than you would, I believe, with a chainsaw. Especially when you're talking about an electric chainsaw that's got a blade that's turning a little bit slower than a two-cycle chainsaw. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy a beam cutter. I'm just saying you should think about, is that the safest way that you can cut a beam? Thank you for watching, and please be safe. We'd sure appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave a comment. You know how YouTube behaves. They won't believe you watched a video unless you leave a comment. Also, it would help if you ring the bell and do a thumbs up. As you know, if I find a good channel, I pass it on to you. So if you think it's appropriate, it would sure help if you passed us on to your closest 10,000 friends and family. But above all, give a helping hand to someone today. It's the best gift to give. It'll make you feel good too.
Don't forget to click like, subscribe, share, or ring the bell buttons on the Original Old Farmer channel. We enjoy reading the comments that you leave, and they do help the channel, so keep them coming. And once again, thank you for watching The Original Old Farmer.
The VFW National Home for Children, providing families of veterans and active duty military opportunities for growth and development in a nurturing community. Please consider a donation to help their children and families. I.C. Rhodes speaking.